As human beings, relationships play such an integral part in our awakening journey. Well, just in our life in general. And what I'm going to cover today is how your relationships evolve during the awakening process, and a little I'm going to get into post-awakening. Because if you're in the awakening process and you're really not identifying with the idea of a separate conditioned self, then one of the first things you'll notice is that your relationships are changing. And sometimes this can be quite confusing because we can go through a lonely period. But I want to start at the beginning. Before we wake up, before we're really clear about the fact that we are pure, infinite being, then our relationships are going to be based completely on the conditioning and the programming that we've gone through, that everyone goes through as a human being on this planet, right? So we're taught from the very beginning that we need people to survive. We're taught that we need people to feel complete. We're taught that other people will be able to help us meet our needs. I mean, there's just the programming around relationships is very, very deep. And within the family system and the community systems and societal systems, the relationships are based on tribal thinking. And then the tribe, although very necessary, particularly when we're young to survive, is not based so much on growth or evolving. The tribal thinking is based on loyalty. It's based on loyalty. So when you begin waking up and disidentifying from the ego, from that sense of separate self, and you really begin to abide more and more in the pure, infinite, unconditionally loving being that you are, then it's going to have an effect on people. And this is where it can get really tricky. So we go from being very asleep and very unconscious to our relationships being completely based on programming, tribal thinking, societal thinking, and so on and so forth. But as we begin to awaken, we start to see through the lens, we begin to see through a lens into our relationships in a very different way. We start to realize that we're not who we thought we were. And so our needs for relationship are not as they once were. And when we begin to change, this is when the boat can really begin to rock. We see this very often within our family relationships, close friends. If you're working within a work environment and you have some close relationships with other people, other colleagues or employees, these people can feel when we begin to shift and awaken, and it can be at times um, uncomfortable and sometimes threatening for other people. Because again, the tribal thinking, and this is very unconscious, is don't change, stay the same. Um, really don't lead the tribe is what the thinking is. And so during this phase of awakening, particularly in the early phases of awakening, it can become very challenging. In fact, I'm going to do a webinar just on this, on relationships. It can become very challenging because people will begin to react to you very differently. And when we don't need people in the same way, because as we're really waking up to the truth of who we are, it brings tremendous amounts of fulfillment and contentment. That doesn't happen right away, but that does happen eventually. But as we're beginning to change and awaken, it will sometimes unconsciously trigger parts in other people where they might feel that they're losing you or that somehow you're going to change and not be there in the same way. And that can bring about a lot of angst. I remember hearing the Zen story one time about the two trees. There was this ancient old tree that was very high, very tall tree, had been around for decades and decades and decades, over 100 years, I believe. And this tree has always had been like the protector of the younger trees in the forest. And it was sitting at one point next to this very young tree, this young sapling tree, and it was being very protective as it had always been. And the young tree noticed, though, that as much as it looked up to this ancient old tree, it wasn't growing. It was like it just wasn't growing very tall, and it felt like for some reason things just weren't happening. And it said to the old tree, I'm just not growing. I'm never going to reach the height that you have reached. And the old tree's like, oh, don't worry. I'm here to protect you. You're safe. And the young tree took that in and began to realize that the reason it wasn't growing is because the tall, ancient tree was blocking its light. Yes, it was being protective, but it was blocking the light. So the young tree wasn't getting enough sunlight in order to really evolve and grow to the height that it was destined to grow. This is just an example of sometimes what it feels like in our relationships when we're awakening. There might be people that have felt very close to you, very protective of you, very supportive of you, and now things are changing. And so it can bring about in some cases, people might pull back from you. People might, and I'm not saying they're trying to be difficult, but they may, in their own ways, disempower you. They may, they could mock the spiritual path that you're on. It could get very challenging. And this is a point where we need to have courage. The awakening path takes courage because you're not only breaking out and disidentifying with all the things that you've been taught of who you thought you were, you're also now opening up to this effortless beingness, this whole truth of who you are that is spontaneous. It doesn't adhere to life and to mainstream thinking at all. And in relationships, as we're really waking up to the truth of who we are going to want more and more time, often alone, because we're going inward. We're going inward. So when we're real externally driven, we're social and we're going out and we're doing things more with people, and that fits into what society deems normal, right? And actually healthy is to spend a lot of time with other people, to not be alone. But when we're waking up, it's like a whole 180 is happening. We're doing 180 degrees where often we'll need time. I know speaking from my own life, just to be alone in nature. That is where I tend to want to spend most of my time when I'm not doing things to work with other people or like helping my clients or spending time with my husband or my dog. I then will be alone, and it's a daily practice. And so when we're going through that, people in your life may feel pushed away. They may feel rejected, and you may feel rejected too because they don't understand what you're going through. So they may begin to pull back, or they may just not understand what's happening at all or what awakening is about, and they might think it's very strange. And so, it's not uncommon for relationships to have some shifts going on. There will be some falling out of relationships, time that you want to be alone, and then over time, and this does take time, this doesn't happen overnight. We need to be patient here and to have courage. But as some people may drop out of your life, over time, other people that can join you where you're at will begin to appear. But again, this takes time. I know people that have actually made the intentional decision to stop the awakening process or even just stop their spiritual growth. I mean, you could be on a progressive path of spiritual growth where you're evolving and you're evolving the body mind, and that's one path. But the direct path of awakening, when we're on the non-dual path, the direct path is very different because that whole body mind identification drops out as you awaken to the truth of who you are. There can definitely be some fallout during this time, but I know people that have put the brakes on simply because they knew they might lose somebody really important in their life, somebody they had been close to, maybe a family member, maybe a spouse or a close friend. And so they've decided that they don't want to go through that loss. There's also this fear of missing out, FOMO. It's big, really big in our culture. So we sometimes worry that if we're changing and opening up and really discovering the truth of our innate nature, our pure being, that we'll lose people. We know that if we're not with those people, we won't be doing as much, socializing as much, and that fear of missing out can be so upsetting that we will sometimes unconsciously just put the brakes on. So it's important to know that if you're going through any of this, you are not alone. You are not alone. And sometimes it can get difficult where you feel like people have just turned their backs on you, and it can become lonely and confusing during this time. But again, you're not alone. I haven't met anyone who's gone through awakening, whether it's been the progressive path or the direct path, that hasn't experienced really significant shifts in their relationships. And sometimes it happens right in the beginning. There's like these significant shifts that happen in terms of form of our relationships, and people that you thought would be in your life for the rest of your life are now gone, and you're like, what's happening? There must be something wrong, and there's nothing wrong. This is exactly what needs to happen. So this phase of awakening where there's shifts going on in our relationships can go on for quite some time. And if you're really on this direct path, and this is your a key focus for you this in this life, then this will keep happening because you're going to be spiraling, to deeper and deeper levels of awakening. And unless somebody's like in that same place with you at the same time, which doesn't happen very often, there will be some shifts that will continue in your relationships. Now, if this is a partner, this comes up a lot. What do I do if I'm very committed to my path of awakening, but my partner or my spouse is not interested at all? And this definitely takes some courage also and patience because we're not here to try to change anyone, nor are we going to allow anyone to try to interfere with anything that has to do with our awakening. Because I really believe very clearly, it's been my lived experience, there's nothing more important than for us to awaken. Nothing more important than that. So nothing can come in the way of that. This has got to be something that we are honoring and cherishing with the utmost respect, our awakening. And as we awaken, then we can bring that much more light and awakening to the earth, to the whole planet, to every living species, every living thing on this planet. So we really, really want to keep that as our priority. But we're not here to change anybody. And so if your partner is not interested in awakening, we let them be wherever they are in their path, but we keep moving forward or we keep going deeper. That might mean that you start spending time in community with other people on the non-dual path. That might mean you're going to retreats, maybe a few times a year, or even once a year, to be in community of like-minded people. I mean, there's plenty of ways we can connect online and really meet up heart to heart with people that are on this path. So we don't need to go about changing anyone who's in our landscape, trying to get them to join us. No, 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 because it never works. It never, ever works. And that really isn't coming from your pure nature. True being, our infinite, invisible consciousness is in full acceptance as everything is, as it is right now. It's like this huge, I can't, it doesn't put words to it. This is like this infinite space that's so boundless, so spacious, so expansive. It can hold everything that is in your field of awareness. And that includes the people in your life. So if anything, we would extend understanding and support, and yet we will not, though, hold ourselves back if they're not ready. But we certainly aren't going to try to change anybody, right? And as this process unfolds and the awakening becomes more stabilized, and what I mean by that is that we're abiding in our true self more and more and more until it's just ongoing. It's just happening effortlessly. There's no more in and out, sliding in and out. I'm in that place of pure peace and contentment and happiness, and then I'm pulled out by something. When we're stabilizing and we're really in that place of pure abidance, then all we want to do in relationship is we don't look to get anything from anybody. There's no more transactional type of relationship thinking. Before we're awake, we're trying to get our needs met. Everyone, we're trying to get our needs met because we believe that we're separate. We believe that we're a separate being. And so if we're a separate being, then we think that we're missing something and we have to have connection and people to fill us up. This is ingrained very deeply is that you need to have relationship, whether that's in a form of a marriage or some kind of partnership. And then it's ingrained very deeply in many women that then they need to have children and then they need to take care of the children. Then they put the focus on the grandchildren. I mean, it's just about staying focused externally on others. But during the awakening, we're like, whoa, whoa, no, as pure being, I'm completely whole and complete. And it's not a concept, it is your lived experience. The contentment goes deep. There really isn't need for anything. And all we really want to do is share that fulfillment and that understanding, that happiness with others. There's no more looking to have to get. We might be sharing grief with others if we have lost a loved one, and that's in your field of awareness. Then pure being would make space, right? That's in your field of awareness. So you could feel that grief. It's not going to stick, but you could feel that and share that with the loved one and hold the space for each other in those kinds of ways. But mainly what we're bringing to relationship is that pure sense of wholeness and profound completion and real happiness with others, including the animal kingdom, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, everything that we encounter. That is just what naturally extends through us. It comes right through us into the field of awareness in which we are experiencing. And since we're all one, that happiness being extended to another, that other is us, and we know there's no duality. What we give, what we receive, all one experience, right? One being, one shared pure being. So I just want to do an overview to just touch on, I understand this comes up a lot with people that I've worked with over the years. As we awaken, our relationships will evolve, and sometimes that means some relationships will drop out. It doesn't usually mean anything really dramatic happens, like there's any big event around it. It's just usually, in my experience, just kind of a falling away. And then there's maybe another person that has come in that's also very committed to his or her awakening. And before we know it, and we need to be patient though, we are connected in community with those people that have this shared experience and are remaining committed to staying awake and not falling back to sleep. All right. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you for joining me. And I've been meaning to say on the videos, which I haven't been, I'm not good about promoting or any of that stuff, but I would love to hear from you. Please share a comment of where you're at, if you would, if you feel comfortable, no pressure, about what you're going through in your relationship as you're on this path of awakening. I'd love to hear whether it's something challenging you're going through or you found a way to work through something. All right, so on that note, thank you so much. Namaste.